Do you find yourself waking up at almost exactly the same time every night? Maybe it's 2 a.m., maybe it's 3 a.m., maybe your eyes just suddenly pop open for absolutely no apparent reason. Or maybe you wake up needing to pee once or multiple times in the night. For some people, it's not considered a big deal. They get up to pee, then they fall straight back asleep and barely remember it in the morning. In fact, a lot of my clients tell me that they sleep really well, and then when I ask them, they tell me, oh no, but I do get up a couple of times in the night to go to the toilet, but then I just fall asleep very easily afterwards again. But for some, once those eyes are open, that's it. You're tossing and turning, and your brain has suddenly decided that 3 a.m. is the perfect time to think about every single problem you've ever had in your life, and sleep feels impossible. So, why does this actually happen? Well, there are obviously lots of reasons why we would wake up in the night, but today I wanted to focus on one that I think is often overlooked, and that is blood sugar balance, and why what you're eating or not eating during the day could actually potentially be contributing to those 3 a.m. wake ups. If you're new here, welcome. I'm Linda Vizzoli. I'm a nutritional therapist, health coach, and senior lecturer at the College of Naturopathic Medicine in London. I help women understand their hormones, restore their energy, and feel confident in their bodies again through simple lifestyle and nutrition shifts, which honor our unique female physiology. So let's dive in. So, what's the deal with the 1 to 3 a.m. wake up window? Interestingly, traditional Chinese medicine has its own explanation for this. According to the traditional Chinese medicine body clock, different organs are associated with different periods throughout the day. And between 1 and 3 a.m. is traditionally associated with the liver. Now, this isn't the same thing as us saying, modern research has proven that waking up at 3 a.m. means there's something wrong with your liver. But I do find the connection really interestingly, particularly when we start talking about something that the liver does that is absolutely important overnight, and that is storing glycogen. And this is what brings us to blood sugar balance. Now, glycogen is essentially stored glucose. Think of it as your body's little energy reserve, and your liver stores glycogen so that when you're not eating, in between meals, when exercising, or when you're asleep, it can release glucose and help keep your blood sugar stable. But what happens if those stores aren't sufficient to carry you through the night? Well, your body still needs to keep your blood glucose within a tightly regulated range. So it has backup systems, hormones like glucagon, as well as stress hormones, including adrenaline and cortisol, are all involved in mobilizing energy and raising blood glucose. And that stress response is not exactly conducive to a peaceful night's sleep. For some people, that stress response, when blood sugar drops and adrenaline and cortisol rises, that might actually just simply look like waking up. But for others, it may seem like we're just waking up to urinate. But for a lot of people, it's actually more dramatic. They wake up suddenly, they feel fully alert, perhaps their heart is beating faster, or they have this horrible anxious feeling where your brain is just going 100 miles an hour, and then you just cannot get back to sleep. So the next question is, what could actually be causing these blood sugar drops throughout the night that are then causing the surge of adrenaline and cortisol to get blood sugar back up and is waking you up at 3 a.m.? Well, here are the ones that I've noticed are the most common reasons for blood sugar dropping in the night with my clients, and things that I've observed myself as well. Now, the first thing I would look at is whether you're actually eating enough carbohydrates. Because at the moment, we're being absolutely bombarded with the message protein, protein, more protein. And don't get me wrong, protein is important. And up until recently, many women seemed not to eat enough of it. So I get the message. But protein isn't the only thing that we need. If you're eating loads of protein, which I see happening a lot at the moment, while simultaneously keeping your carbohydrates very low, you may not be giving your body as much reliable available glucose as it needs. And if we're not consuming enough carbohydrates overall, our liver glycogen stores are going to be lower. So you get through the day, you get into bed, you sleep for a few hours, and then suddenly, hello, 3 a.m. blood sugar drop. And so this is why it's really important not to just look at how much protein someone is eating. You also want to make sure that they're eating, enough carbohydrates with that protein to keep blood sugar balance and those glycogen stores topped up. Next up is alcohol. Have you ever noticed that after drinking, you may fall asleep quite easily, but then wake up in the middle of the night? Because I certainly have. For me, this happens every single time. Alcohol can actually disrupt our sleep architecture and affect our glucose regulation. So, even though it might initially make us feel sleepy, the second half of our night's sleep is going to be much more disrupted. From a traditional Chinese medicine point of view, alcohol is also traditionally associated with putting additional burden on the liver. So if your mysterious 3 a.m. wake ups happen particularly after a couple of glasses of wine, that's definitely something that's worth paying attention to. Number three is fasting. And I know this is not a very popular opinion because fasting is considered this holy grail of health for some reason at the moment. But whichever way you put it, fasting is a physiological stressor. Now, that doesn't automatically mean that it's bad for everybody. And if fasting is working for you, then you do you, sister. But it does mean that your body has to maintain your blood glucose whilst you're not eating. And if you skip breakfast, don't eat until midday, perhaps have a fairly light lunch, and then you're also very busy, you're exercising and just dealing with normal life stress. You're asking your body to do quite a lot. So then it will recruit hormones such as glucagon, cortisol, and adrenaline, and they all play roles in keeping energy available during periods without food, which is what we talked about earlier. So if you're someone who is fasting and then waking up through the night, I would at least question whether those things could be connected. Now, finally, and this is probably one of the biggest things I see, is under eating. I sound like a broken record, I know, but so many women I know and work with are either purposely or inadvertently not eating enough to sustain everything that they're asking their bodies to do. And I experienced this myself actually. Last year, I did a fat loss phase where I deliberately went into a calorie deficit for a number of weeks. And everything was fine initially, but after a few weeks, I started waking up during the night needing to urinate. It happened again and again. And then my fat loss phase finished. My calories went back up to maintenance, and hey presto, the night waking stopped. Now, that experience really brought home to me how sensitive sleep can be to total energy availability. We're talking about energy, I'm talking about calories. It doesn't mean that every night waking is caused by undereating, but if you're recently cutting your calories and suddenly you're waking up at 2 or 3 a.m., then I wouldn't ignore that connection. Or if you've been dieting on and off for decades and suddenly sleep seems to be deteriorating because of perimenopause, it may be more than your hormones having a say here. As I've said before, perimenopause is really the time when a lot of our habits come to the surface and our body's like, I can't get away with this anymore. So whilst you may have been sleeping through the night, whilst undereating in your 20s and 30s, when you get to your 40s and 50s, your body might just not be able to deal with that anymore. Or maybe you've been undereating and going on and off diets for your whole life, and sleep has also been elusive. So that's something to keep in mind as well. Another piece of the puzzle, which is really interesting as well, can be thyroid function. In the bioenergetic framework of Ray Peat, hypothyroidism actually impairs our liver's ability to store and properly release glycogen. And this failure then destabilizes blood sugar between the meals, forcing the body to overproduce stress hormones like adrenaline and cortisol to break down tissues for fuel. But also, optimal sleep actually comes from a body which produces energy efficiently, or as we may say, a body that has a good metabolism. In fact, in one of his articles, which I'll link below, Ray Peat actually mentions that increasing the body's energy level and temperature, which means metabolic rate and thyroid function, improves the quality of sleep. So, if any of these reasons sound like you and you've been struggling with sleep and waking up at that time, what can you actually do? Let's think about some practical things that you can actually put into place. The first thing I would do is to work on balancing your blood sugar and fueling yourself properly throughout the day. And that means eating regular, balanced meals, within an hour of waking up and also throughout the day. Getting adequate protein, absolutely, but make sure that you're actually eating enough carbohydrates alongside it to provide glucose and to replenish glycogen stores. And make sure that you're simply eating enough food. If you're fasting and waking up throughout the night, I'd experiment with stopping the fasting and eating breakfast, ideally within an hour of waking up. If you're dieting aggressively, you might consider whether your calorie deficit is too large or has gone on for too long. And if alcohol reliably has you staring at the ceiling at 3 a.m., that's another very obviously fairly obvious experiment to run. You could also experiment with a small bedtime snack containing carbohydrates and protein. Something as simple as milk with a little honey could work really well for some people. I personally love a nice hot chocolate with honey before bed in the wintertime. Some people swear by a bowl of homemade ice cream before bed for sleeping like a baby. And that really sounds good to me. But obviously, if weight is a concern, that might not be something that you want to be doing every single night. Even a mug of salty bone broth can do the trick, or even just some people find it really easily to just have a couple of spoonfuls of honey before bed. There are also some other more interesting ideas around this. Ray Peat, for example, discussed using quick sources of carbohydrates such as orange juice with salt in relation to stress hormones and low glycogen. So he would recommend sipping on salty orange juice if you woke up in the night. Now, the idea is not that everybody needs to eat before bed, but it can definitely tide you over whilst you work on sorting out the blood sugar issues that we mentioned before in the background. So, what you really want to be asking is this: does my body actually have enough fuel to comfortably get through the night? And if you're waking because you're underfueled, addressing that underfueling makes a lot more sense than simply trying to force yourself back to sleep or trying to find that quick fix, some magic supplement that's going to help you sleep. Now, night waking can have lots of causes, from stress to alcohol to your environment, your hormones, and as I mentioned earlier, low metabolic states. But when I work with my clients who are not sleeping through the night, I will look at what their body has experienced during the day. Are they eating enough? Are they getting enough carbohydrates? Are they fasting? Are they eating super erratically? Or are they in a calorie deficit? Are they drinking alcohol on a regular basis? Are they getting outside first thing in the morning and avoiding screens before bed? Are they stressed to their eyeballs while simultaneously asking their body to survive on chicken breast and green veggies? So, have a think about these things. Think about your daily habits and how they may be impacting your nighttime sleep. Because here's the thing: your 3 a.m. wake up might actually be starting at 8 a.m. And if you've noticed that you wake up at a really specific time every night, let me know in the comments what time it is. If you found this useful, please subscribe, because we're going to be talking a lot more about metabolism, hormones, nutrition, and what our bodies are actually trying to tell us in future videos. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.